Well, good morning. I want to remind anybody that's here that is a part of our community and anyone that's new, anyone that's watching for the first time, that I do a podcast weekly with Jared Jacobus called The Rest, and it's always connected to the message. So we kind of have what we talk about on Sunday, and then we move into that podcast and have further discussions about it. So it actually is a great supplement for you, kind of if you hear the message, take some notes, and it impacts you, and then you want some further thoughts. They come out first thing on Thursday morning, the podcast does, and so you can kind of just connect with everything that is related to one of these particular topics. Also, we love it when people email and ask questions, and we talk to them that way, and it's really fun. And the podcast is short. It's like 30 to 40 minutes, and Jared does a really good job hosting it, so it's fun. Today is also Prayer Sunday, and for us, what that means is that we're gonna give you an intentional time of prayer. After I'm done speaking, I'm gonna help you, lead you that way. We have people up here who, if you just wanna come and pray generally, if you have something specific, that's fine too. And also if you wanna sit in the room, once that time starts and just pray and just sit in some solitude and silence, then you can do that as well. But I wanna kind of give you a little bit of a heads up, and as you read the passage, you know sometimes messages when you come to church that they have a certain nature. There are times when you come to church and you hear a message and it fills you up with kind of excitement and joy and maybe enthusiasm, and then you have messages that sometimes make you feel like I did this message for our team this week, and Carmen was like, yeah, I think everyone's gonna walk out with their tail between their legs. So there are times when what God has to say is a challenge to us and can be a reminder or a revelation that there's something going on in us and through us that is not part of God's intentional design for human flourishing. And so today is one of those messages. But I will say that as I talk about this, it is not something that I am attuned to simply because I've observed it in others, but holistically because I've observed it in myself. And so I make the great assumption that it applies to you as well. And I think after reading that, you know that that's right. Today, I titled the message, which I don't normally do. I'm calling it Don't Get Swept Away. And you'll see why as we go through this message. I want you to imagine for a moment, if you had passes to Disney World, particularly the Magic Kingdom, because the Magic Kingdom is, where the boat comes up and the train comes up, and it has that beautiful entrance, and it's kind of majestic, and you see the castle in the background. Imagine that you are standing at the gate with you or anybody that you love or whatever. You have passes to go to any of the parks, definitely the Magic Kingdom. And but you also, in your hand, you have information about every family that walks into the park that day, about their failures, about their problems, about their kind of their exploits, whatever it is, all the stuff, all the dirt, all the bad information about them. Imagine that you have that ticket to go in and you have all this information. So whenever a couple walks up, you can see like, ooh, he did this and she did that and they did that. And you can just kind of sit there all day and you can tally up all the negative things and see the failures and say you decide, instead of going into the park, to stand there and all day long, as you're looking at the negative things about people, you're rating yourself against them. You don't go in the park, but you stand there and you're like, okay, here comes these people. And you're like, oh, they're a little better than me. Okay, I'm above them, or below them, and I'm above these people. Oh my gosh, she did that and he did that, and they think this and they think that. And you just kind of spend all day kind of putting yourself somewhere in some measurement in your mind. You're rating yourself compared to them. You decide with every family whether you're better than them or not. And the reality is that you can't change anything, but you like the idea of seeing where you rank. You can't change anything. You can't fix them. You just like to rank yourself. And why this type of exercise is low grade, classless, and shallow, something about it makes you feel good to see the worst in people and be propped up by their dysfunction. It's sad that one would choose to feed off of this exercise, the negativity in other people's lives. But what is worse is this practice makes you miss all of the things that you could do if you went into the park that you paid to get in. Spending these minutes goes below zero in the negative use of life and time. Not only do you miss out on all the good you could have been doing, even though you know all the bad things about people, there's literally, like I said, nothing you can do about it. And this story is absurd, isn't it? This idea is absurd to think about this. But the reality is that we do this. We all do this. We all have opportunities in our mind, with our time, and in our lives that we stand in front of, that we have passes to, we have a reality, we have an exploration, we have an adventure, we have a beautiful experience that we can go do and spend our time and our energy on. But so many of us are so preoccupied with the lives of others and looking at them and judging them and seeing them through a critical lens, that if we actually took the time to lay out the amount of headspace, the amount of time in our day that we spend judging, criticizing, thinking about other people, we would probably be grossed out the way you kind of might when you look at your screen time and you go, oh gosh, I have too much screen time. I need to put my screen time down. But so many of us spend time thinking negatively about other people. It just represents this reality of wasted time and energy. We live in a world where our own personal flourishing then, all the reality, all the goodness that we have at our fingertips, all the things we could be doing that we don't do because we fill our mind with this negative stuff, is thwarted by the preoccupation with others. We're very quick to focus on the failings of others. And without repentance, without change from this pattern, it will bring nothing good into our lives, to their lives, and to the community at large. What I want to challenge you all is to not get swept away by the spirit of criticism and judgment that is so easy to get sucked into. And when I talk about being judgmental or being critical, I want to make sure you understand specifically what we're talking about. I think most of us do. But it's not the idea of having good judgment. And we're not saying that if you have good judgment, you're judgmental, right? Good judgment is different. In fact, most people that have good judgment are not usually considered judgmental. Judgmental is a negative word to describe someone who often rushes to judgment without reason. The adjective judgmental describes someone who forms lots of opinions, usually harsh or critical ones, about lots of people. Judgmental types are typically not open-minded or easygoing. And the burden that I have, kind of the concern that I bring to our church today, is what a gross waste of human energy and mental space this can be. It is such a waste of what God has intended for us to do. And we often spend so much unnecessary time and hurtful time in this space. We all do it. And I want to try to steer us away from it. And I want to bring awareness to it. And I want to look at some of the greatest thinkers who have talked about this reality throughout time, and then specifically look at our Lord and Savior, who kind of brings it all home. One of the most famous speeches kind of in the history of the United States of America is actually a speech that's called Citizenship in a Republic. And it was given by Teddy Roosevelt in Paris on April 23rd, 1910. And a lot of us know a part of this speech, like a lot of presidential speeches, there's parts that become the part that you remember. And there's a part inside of this speech called the man in the arena. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of the man in the arena. This is one of those parts of a speech that oftentimes it gets printed and put on walls, or people will post just this one part, or some people memorize just this one part. A lot of speakers may quote just this one part. But the backdrop to this story is interesting. Teddy Roosevelt has already been the president, and then he goes on a hunting trip in Northern Africa for a while. And then he ends up going to Paris to give a speech, and he's kind of going around Europe to give speeches. And after he spent all of his time as president, and in his mind, trying to make the world a better place, which is simple enough and noble enough, right? If that was all it was, it doesn't feel like that to us when we think about politics. But at the heart of being a political leader really is servanthood, the desire and the functionality to serve the people and to make the world a better place. That is literally what politicians are supposed to be spending their time doing. And after he does his time to try to make the world a better place, and he gets some distance, he starts to get this kind of clarity around the reality of how much criticism was brought to him for trying to bring the world and make the world a better place. And of course, sometimes, when you're in that spotlight, that's what happens. It's just, the Bible talks about this. If you're going to be a teacher, the teacher is going to get more criticism, right? If you stand up and teach, then you're going to get more criticism. If you're a political leader, you're going to get, everyone's looking at you and you're speaking and they're looking at your life and they're looking at your words and all of that stuff. But what he finally came to was this place where he realized that so much of it was not really good criticism, but just people who waste their time being critical instead of joining him in making the world a better place. And so then he gives this speech, and so much of it is actually profound. The part that we all know is the part that kind of goes like this. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error or shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great enthusiasms and great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumphant of high achievement, and who at worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Now, when he gave this speech, it's actually said that multiple times throughout the speech, the crowd erupted, and that there were 25,000 people there, and they just continued to give him applause as he would say these things. And then when that part came, it was just this explosive thing. But he leads up to that with all these other sentiments that kind of support that artful idea. The poorest way to face life is to face it with a sneer, he says. A cynical habit of thought and speech and readiness to criticize work, which the critic himself never tries to perform, an intellectual aloofness, which will not accept contact with his life's realities. All these are marks, not as the possessor would feign to think of superiority, but of weakness. They mark the men unfit to bear their part painfully in the stern strife of living, who seek in the affection of contempt for the achievement of others to hide from others and from themselves their own weakness. I mean, he goes on and on and on about why and how this happens. Another great thinker was a Stoic, a Greek philosopher named Epictetus, and he is a person who kind of brings this thought, brings another thought to this, and he talks about something called the dichotomy of control. And it's important to think about what other great thinkers that, kind of make it throughout history, right? It's important to think understand what they have to say. Some of them tap into some of the greatest truths and realities that have ever been articulated. And what he brings to the table, which I find interesting because the Greek philosophy was actually a philosophy that was part of what was happening in the time of Christ. All right, so by the time Jesus shows up, the Greeks have moved their culture all across the world, including into Jerusalem and all that, and they've been affected by all types of things. And so this was actually a school of thought that was one of some of the thoughts that kind of prevailed in the world that day. And this is the idea of the dichotomy of control. And the whole thing boils down to this one idea, that there is some stuff that is up to us and some stuff that is not. And what Epictetus gets to is that the chief task is for us to figure out what we can control and then only spend our time, energy, effort, mind on the things that we control. And so by deduction, if you start to think about all the time you spend criticizing, it literally is just it's like a trash land. It's like a cesspool for your mind. And then it actually steals from any type of flourishing and goodness that you could be doing. It's like, what could you be doing? And you have no control over it. So it's like, it might be just like a smidge of noble to think about the negative realities of other people and then make an impact. That's a thing. That's a thing. But when you spend time thinking about others, criticizing them, and putting judgment upon them, then you have just wasted one of life's most precious attributes: your time, your energy, your focus, your mind. And this seems simple enough, to spend time on stuff that's, only up to us. But the reality is that we all spend time on a bunch of stuff that we have no control over. None. We complain about stuff. We wish stuff was otherwise. We spend our time worrying about the future or regretting the past. And none of that is energy towards what we can actually control, which is right in front of me. You see, what he's getting at is the dichotomy of control is about resource allocation. What are you going to spend yourself on? What are you going to do? Are you going to spend your time on stuff that is up to you or not? Every second that is spent on something that is not up to you is wasted. And every second you spend on something that is up to you might make a difference. And they actually believed that there were only two things that we had direct control over: our voluntary actions and how we think about things. Everything else, the past, what other people are doing, what other people are thinking, the outcomes of certain actions, is outside of our control. The critical point is that we should adopt a totally different attitude to things, depending on whether or not they're in our control or not. I want you to think about how much of a waste of time it is for you to spend energy criticizing someone and that you can't make a difference about. You can't even do it. It's such a waste. This is such there was research done about this kind of, this concept that Epictetus laid out, the idea of controlling the controllables. And people studied it and they were tested, and they found out that people that actually focused on controlling the controllables had a particular significant association and a new balance of positive thoughts over negative emotions. I mean, it's like all these positive things to move into the space where it's like you're gonna focus on what's in front of you. Why not? You see, we can't control what other people do. And when we try or when we spend our time, it's a waste of life. We can control what we do. And it's good use of our time to focus on that. It's actually the best way to change the world. Epictetus said this as well when you start to get offended by other people, because sometimes we get drawn into thinking about other people because something about them and what they did makes us mad or it makes us angry. And potentially there's some validity to that, but he says this: when you are offended by any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Study your own failings. then you will forget about your anger. Again, you can get angry about what everyone else is doing. You can let it occupy your mind, but then you're not doing anything different with your time, and you're losing traction on gaining momentum for what God has called you to actually do in your life. And this is the quote that I read almost a year ago that was kind of the beginning of this message. I've been thinking about this. I talked about this at a leadership conference. I talked about this in front of all the Gahanna coaches. I did a thing for the whole district, and I talked about this quote, and this is something that really has struck me. And this is what Jesus will get into, and this is what I want our church to start to focus on in an entirely different way. And it's a quote by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. There you go, that's a name. All right, now this guy, he's known today still as one of the greatest, most influential French writers of all time, and he said this: let everyone sweep in front of his own door and the whole world will be clean. Let everyone sweep in front of his own door and the world will be clean. You know, the heart of this is you're not supposed to sweep your neighbor's front porch. No, wait a minute. What about loving your neighbor? Oh, no, you're supposed to love your neighbor. But if you are over sweeping their porch because it's dirty and yours is dirty, you're missing it. And I want you to just think about the analogy literally for a second, right? Because you get the art of it. Oh, we shouldn't be critical. Oh, we should be dealing with our own stuff. But literally, what if you had this really dirty porch, you know? Like we have a covered porch in the front of our house. Yesterday, Redding, mom had her like spraying it out because like birds and critters get in there and it gets really dirty and they put like, you know, sticks and stuff in there. And so you got to spray it out. Now imagine if going out there is, you know, there's like all kinds of dirt on it and it needs cleaned. Imagine us saying, Redding, go over across the street and clean the neighbor's porch. And then it's just like you're over there and it's like, why are you cleaning their porch? Because I want to. Now, at first they might think that's really nice. Wow, they just came over to clean my porch. But then if they came over to thank you later and they saw your porch, they'd be like, what the heck? Why are they out cleaning everybody else's porch when they don't have it together? And this is the idea. It is our job to sweep our own porch. It is our job to figure out what's going on with us. It is for us to spend our time in our minds to actually move forward in human flourishing as it's related first and foremost to me before I start to criticize my neighbor. And of course, what we read, Jesus brings this all back into full view, and he gives us the divine. He gives us the kind of transcendent insight into this as God in the flesh, teaching the people of earth whom he created, whom he is in this moment and forever will be. He is teaching them what it's like to be a good citizen of earth as it's related to all of the people on earth who need so much help. So much help. And he says these things in the Sermon on the Mount. Now, what's interesting about this passage is you read it, and you can put it up there real quick. You can look at it again. Judge not that you be not judged. For with the same judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it will be measured. And why do you see, remember this if you grew up in church, if not, this is an interesting phrase. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye? Why do you see the speck that's in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your own eye when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will clearly take the speck out of your brother's eye. And Jesus unpacks the necessity to sweep your own porch. He also shows us that our desire to make the world a better place is a good thing, but it has to be in proper order. Sweep your own porch first, then sweep the sidewalk, then the street, then the city. Like our job is to consider our homes as our places that God has called us to be holy stewards of. That it's our job to bring the goodness of God into the places that we dwell. And from the roots of that, it grows forth and brings fruit into the world around us. This is what God has called us to focus on. This is what Jesus is saying. This speech is a change the world speech. This is this speech is infinitely more popular, more powerful, and potent than Teddy Roosevelt's mesmerizing speech. This is what Jesus is saying. You want to be a part of the kingdom of God. You want to bring the goodness of God into the world. And what we all naturally do is we go to, well, then they should do X and they should do Y. And if all of them did that, and if people would be, and if they would think like me, and we just think about everyone else. And Jesus goes, stop. Stop thinking about the neighbor across the street and what they need to get better. Stop thinking about the person you don't like on social media and how they bother you. What a waste of space for your brain. And he uses that analogy. It's just so interesting. As parents, when we think about what Jesus says here, it is so simplistic and elementary, it's laughable. You have two kids. One kid does something that's like almost nothing. The other kid wails on the kid and they look at each other and the one goes, well, he did that to me. And you're like, dude, you got a big old thing. You just punched him in the face. You just punched him in the face and you're upset that they crossed the line in the back of the seats and that they don't have their seatbelt or whatever. Like you just did this egregious thing. And instead of going like, whoa, why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. Then parents have to go, he did that to you because you did that to him. We do all this stuff. And Jesus is going, this is it. This is it. You're spending all this time on someone who's like going over the line a little bit while you're wailing away on somebody. And what do you need to do? You want to make that situation better? Look at the log in your eye. Get that out of your eye. Clean up your porch. Do your own thing. You want to bring goodness to the world? It is the summary. It is the total of every individual Christian who loves God fully, devotes themselves to personal holiness, and therefore brings about the potential for exponential expansion in the world. Not when we overlook ourselves and become the great consultant for every neighbor that walks by. That just moves the needle away from growth. Now, when you bring judgment into the world and you haven't fixed your own reality, Jesus says that judgment's gonna be brought on you. So now you're creating conflict in community. One of the worst possible things that humans can do is to be critical of someone for something they themselves are doing. It literally is a root of bitterness and destruction relationally. You know this. You know that when someone tells you to do something, you're like, I don't really care that you told me to do that. It's just that you do it too. And it bugs you that they would come at you for something that they do too. It's like, who are you? Christians should be the ones who are occupied with God's revelation in their hearts, in their minds, what's going on with them and how God is cleaning them out and bringing mercy to them so that they can be an agent, a citizen of heaven in the world that they live. And then their disposition changes. Jesus warned sternly against condemning others. And this doesn't mean that Christians aren't supposed to be magistrates and judge. He intends that the world should be ordered. Jesus is referring not to law courts, but to judgments and condemnations that occur in our daily lives. This is where people see themselves as the moral guardians and the critics of others. You know, judgment in and of itself is a really good word. It's a good word. To bring, the idea of judgment is to make something correct, to bring order, to fix, to justify, right? To make it better. God wants to do that. He's just saying the way you do that is you start at home. You bring order here. You let God bring order here, and then you can bring it there. It's very important that we know that we're supposed to have super high standards for the world, but that can easily get turned into the temptation to look down on one another for moral failures and in a way almost play God. You see, so God is the one who brings about the process to make the world a more beautiful place. And what's interesting about his process is that it's so different from ours and it's so helpful to us. You see, God is sovereign and he wants to bring goodness into the world. And Jesus is himself God. And he takes on human sin and all the self-righteousness that we have and he exposes them and he deals with them on the cross and in the resurrection. You know, he takes on sin, he becomes sin. He knows no sin. He becomes sin on our behalf so that we can then become righteousness. He's bringing the cleanliness that we need. He's bringing the potential. He's bringing the opportunity for you and me to experience life the way that we were designed to. He does all of that. And he allows in that moment of his forgiveness, of his grace, for mercy to triumph over judgment. Mercy. So he brings mercy to your doorstep. Your house is dirty and you can't clean it. So you can't clean your house without the help of Jesus, and then you go try to clean your neighbors? You invite Jesus into your life and he helps you clean, and he does that not because he is just, wanting to switch it up. He does that because the way that God operates is he knows that unless he brings mercy, unless he brings love, unless he brings compassion into your world, that your porch will never be cleaned. So he shows you mercy. He gives you something that you don't deserve. He brings life, he brings goodness to you, and then your life is changed by mercy. And the irony in this is that we don't see that that's the way that we're supposed to be with others. We think judgment will bring about the goodness of God, but the thing that brought us the goodness of God was not judgment, it's his mercy. The mercy of God is what made us alive. Do you understand what mercy is? It's getting what you don't deserve. It's him showing up in the dirt to clean the porch, to give you the gift so that you can go, I didn't do anything for this gift. And I'm gonna now join you in sweeping the porch. And I'm gonna make sure that I'm living according to the mercy that was given to me. And now what's going to change the world is the same thing that changed me. It's mercy. The brother of Jesus, he says this in James 2:3, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anybody who has not been merciful. And that's kind of a proverb, if you will. But mercy triumphs over justice. It's really interesting. We have a God that shows us mercy. And there's a mystery in this that needs to be pondering. And the mystery of mercy is that mercy is given because it is needed, first for me, then through me, to them. So I want to ask you a question to ask yourself. What is your heart's disposition towards people? Are you a judgment person or are you a mercy person? When you look at the brokenness in the world, what do you go to? What's your snap reflex? What's your heart's kind of articulation about them? What do you say in your mind when someone else's eye has a speck in it? When someone else's porch is dirty, what do you go to? Do you go to judgment, critical thinking, woe to them? Or do you think, thank God? My porch is, you see their porch and you go, I've had a dirty, oh my goodness, my porch has been so dirty. And I still got to clean up my porch. And every day I got to clean up my porch. And without Jesus, I couldn't clean up my porch. And man, I hope that those people one day, maybe through my kindness, which is the kindness that saved me, they would experience the kindness of God. And through the nature of God's extension through his church, the people of God would experience mercy. Even Jesus leans towards mercy over judgment. You see, he doesn't have to pick mercy, but we do. It is the mercy he willfully offers us in our obvious folly that allows us to continue handing it down. Woe to he who breaks the chain and trades mercy for justice when justice was spared for us so that we may show mercy. Do as your Father did. When God's mercy flows your way and touches your heart, it is there for you and it is there for them. So why do we judge? We judge because it feels good. We judge because it feels good. And we don't have the maturity to know that's not a healthy practice. My kids, we have a 13-year-old and he's just growing like a weed and basically it's just like he can eat anything, just anything and everything, just whatever we can get, just throw it in, just open your mouth, throw it in there. And there's not enough food around and it's just feed him. And then, there's times when it's like, here's, a donut and I don't think there's anything. My wife is a therapist and she works with eating disorders. And so like we have kind of a different view of food in our house than you might fathom, but no food is bad food. All right, it has different qualities and it has different times and there's a time for sugar and there's a time for, it's fine, but you certainly should not live your whole life eating donuts. It's just not, that's not healthy, right? But it's also not healthy to never have a donut. Amazing that that's what got the applause. Amazing. But it's so true, and so you look at it a certain way, you can't build your life on donuts, right? Imagine like just everything. It's like, oh, that's good. And then, when your kid's eating, like I was talking about, it's like, yeah, that's good. You want another one? Yeah, I want another one. Yeah, I want another one. Yeah, I want another one. Yeah, that's good. I want another one. Yeah, I want another one. And then you get sick. This is what happens when we kind of just feed off of what it feels like to criticize other people. It does something to us that's actually damaging to us. And actually what it is when we criticize others is it's like an offensive move, or you might say it's like a shield. I'm gonna call it a 10,000 pound shield to block us from ever having to deal with the plank in our own eye. It's like so hard for us to look in the mirror. You know this? So hard to look in the mirror. This is the origin story. This is the story of humanity. I've talked about this so many times. The book of Genesis, chapter 1 and chapter 2, is not simply a story of something that happened. It's a story of something that happens. And what we do is when we have dirt in our lives, we cover ourselves. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to deal with it. It's really dark and difficult to look at the broken realities in your soul and invite God into that and feel that vulnerability. That's hard to do, man. That is like really, really difficult to do. It's painful. It's going through massive surgery. And it's like, imagine the doctor comes and he says, you have this serious problem and it's just judging other people. And in order for you to get away from that, you have to go through a massive surgery where there's gonna be 6 months recovery and it's gonna be so painful. But in the end, it will be better. Most of us would go, I don't want to do that. I just want to live every day whatever. I don't want to have to go through that type of pain. Having God move in and look at you. It's like, he's like, stop looking at them. Stop looking at them. What's going on with you? Oh man, you start to worry and think about what happened when you were a kid and what are your proclivities and what are your sinful desires and what are the things that bring dirt to your porch and that's so hard to do. And the only way that we can ever become the kind of people that are the people that Jesus intended to bring about the goodness of God into the world is if we let him bring the goodness of God into our lives. And that takes exposure to God. And that is vulnerable and that is dark. And that's what growing up is. Looking in the mirror, growing up is hard. It takes a level of deliberate action and responsibility that most of us never have. We're afraid to let others see the reality of darkness in our lives. You know, I thought about having cleaning people. Every now and again we'll have professional cleaners come in and clean the house and just do everything. And at first it's like, you want to have cleaning people in the house because you want your house clean, but it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. I've come home when there's some people cleaning the house and I'm like, were you in my closet? Did you go in there? It's like, did you go in there? Did you see what it's like, and it's embarrassing. But once you do, and you experience the mercy of cleanliness and making of good over judgment, then you become a person who switches from seeing people through the lens of judgment to a lens of others who need mercy too. And in the way, they're no different. You had a dirty house, they have a dirty house, we all have a dirty house. And we need someone to come in and do something, and then we can kind of bring that goodness to the world. You're not becoming like Jesus when you let yourself look down on others. A great clinical psychologist named Carl Jung, who I don't agree with everything that he says, same as Epictetus, and Teddy Roosevelt, but interesting thought. He said this about humans. He said, thinking is too hard, so people judge. Isn't that interesting? Thinking is too hard, so people just judge. It's easy, feels good. And here's what I want to leave you with. The more you consider your life as a growth project, the less time you spend wasting and thinking about others and their lack of growth. I want everyone to say this out loud. I have not reached my potential. I have not reached my potential. You see, when we start to focus our minds on God's work in our lives, we have no room, we have no time to bring judgment into the world. And when we get to be the kind of people who, when we see someone with a dirty porch, we move to them with mercy. You know what that means? It means that that's what's going to be brought to us, mercy. It means that we're the kind of people who see the reality. I have not reached my potential. Can I tell you, a sure sign, this is Dr. Henry Cloud, a sure sign that you are getting wiser is when you are increasingly becoming more aware of your own faults than the faults of others. And I gotta tell you, the more I understand that life is about progress and growth for me, the more mercy I have while other people are going through the same process. And the more I'm trying to go wake up every single day and go, God, what are you doing in my life? What do you have for me? Like, what do you need me to change? And what do you need me to offer you? And how can I serve the community around me? And this is not a selfish disposition to be concerned with what's going on in you. It is an honest disposition and it's a growth disposition. But when I'm in that space, I don't have time or headspace. When I'm growing daily and the major part of that growth is loving others and seeing my value as a person designed for great purpose by God, it's like I'm an agent of change. I'm an agent of bringing the goodness into my world. And if I can bring it to others, then thank God. Get your house in order. Eleanor Roosevelt said this: great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, small minds discuss people. Whew. Great minds. You wanna have a great mind? It's the mind of Christ. Move out of the gutter. Don't feed off of judging others. Let your conversation bring delight to God, and that you're talking about what's happening in you and in the world. And do not slip into I know I shouldn't, but I gotta say, don't. And if you are in that space where you just constantly go to people, pray. Pray. And ask God to remind you of his mercy. For when you see the mercy of God, you release the judgment of others. It brings compassion, it brings peace, it brings forgiveness into the world. So let's not be a church who spends our time trying to fix everybody else. Let's not get swept away. Let's sweep our own porch. Now I'm gonna say a prayer, and when I'm done, this is an appropriate time for you to pray. Every one of us has a judgmental spirit. Every one of us has spent time in spaces thinking about people and things that we should not. And this is a time to pray. You don't have to come forward with the prayer team and pray with them, but maybe you should. And you can pray about anything. You can pray about something general. But I'm gonna say a prayer, and when I'm done, if you gotta go, then you can go. If you wanna sit there and you just wanna pray and ask God to reveal some things about you and do some thinking, do some looking in the mirror, great. If you want some help, come up and pray. But I think it would be really fun and amazing and godly to imagine a world with a bunch of people who stop criticizing one another. And we ask God to change us. So let's pray, and then we'll move into a moment of prayer for the church while we close. God, I thank you so much that you bring this into full view. I thank you so much that that you remind us to look in the mirror, that you show us that you're speaking directly to us, to me. You have a thought for me. You're talking to me. You're talking to every individual in here. You are talking to their neighbor and to their friend, but that's not for me and that's not for them. You have something for me. Oh God, I think a lot of us are well-intended and we want the world to be better and more beautiful. And we want it to grow and we want your kingdom to happen, man. Like we do, we really do. But just like anything else, we don't know how. And you're showing us how. Create in us a clean heart. Create in me a clean heart. Show me the error of my ways. Help me to be responsible with what's in my hands. Help me to be faithful with what you've given me. And once I can stand and honestly say that there's been faithfulness in me and my world, then God, if you call me across the street to bring about the goodness, then I will go. And when I go with mercy and not judgment. And God, we love you and we're so thankful for your word, Jesus. We're so thankful for the authors of this New Testament and the years and the time that's been spent to preserve it so that we can glimpse the divine today in Jesus. We love you. And we're gonna spend some time praying and thinking and asking you to speak to us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey everyone, we are so glad that you hung out with us today. We would love to connect with you. We'd love to pray for you. We'd love to hear from you. So please text hi to the number on the screen, and we can't wait to see you soon.